Hi everyone, and welcome into another Production 3 remote learning video. Again, if you have any questions on this, you want to talk about anything about this, even if you want to talk about it as a group, make sure to let me know. We can discuss over email, or we can set up a Zoom or a Skype session, maybe through Collaborate and Blackboard, and we can set something up and get all your questions answered. Today, I'm going to go through, I can call it odds and ends, but it's stuff I've never shown you before in Blackboard. Some of it is really good to use in that it really speeds up your workflow. Some of it goes a little too deep. In other words, of everything I'm about to show you, one thing I do extremely regularly in that almost any time I produce something on a commercial basis. Another thing I don't do, but I see the benefit of it for some situations. Another thing I have done several times in the past, I just find it actually slows me down, so I don't use it every single time I do something. And the last thing I want to show you today is a brand new feature that I think is interesting, but let's just say I don't trust it. So we'll get through a bunch of stuff today. This video may go a little bit longer than normal. So the first thing I want to sort of do is give you a background on Adobe Audition. So I've been using this software since probably the mid-1990s in one form or another. So Adobe Audition was originally developed by a company called Centrillium Software. It was made up of two ex-Microsoft employees, and the first thing they came up with was a product called Cool Edit. And if anybody ever remembers computer stuff from the 1990s, everybody in the world had Cool Edit because this was this cute little audio editing program, and it looked a lot like the waveform view in Audition. So they put that out. It was freeware. Everybody loved it. And then they came out with something called Cool Edit Pro 1.0. And Cool Edit Pro took Cool Edit's waveform view and added multi-track view. Great, except version 1.0 was really buggy. I came in at version 1.1 and it was still fairly buggy. And then they came out with version 1.2, which was actually rock solid. It was really good software. The difference is you had to go into edit view to apply any effect. So, and when you save it, it's permanent changes. So that took a bit getting used to. If I wanted to add echo, I had to go into multi-track or go into waveform view, put the echo on, bring it into multi-track, see if it worked. And if I didn't like the effect, I had to go back to edit view and undo stuff. Kind of a slow process. So they came out with version 2.0 of Cool Edit Pro, and this was when I first started working behind the scenes with then Centrillium. I became an advanced tester. So I got to test all the improvements of the software they made as they made them months before they became public release. So 2.0 brought in some of the real-time processing that we see now in Audition. So I can add my effects in multi-track and see how they fit in conjunction with everything else in the session. And it started adding more and more neat effects and stuff you can do with stuff. 2.0 became 2.1, Centrillium Cool Edit Pro 2.1. Decent software, really good stuff, really getting a lot of attention. And it was at that point that Adobe bought Centrillium Software for the grand price of $16.5 million. So the two guys who were running Centrillium made $16.5 million. This was sort of just before the big tech boom. I'm sure if they had waited a couple of years, they would have got hundreds of millions of dollars, but no, they got 16 million. And as far as I know, the two of them are still working with Adobe on new versions of the software. So Adobe comes out with Audition 1.0, which was Centrillium Cool Edit Pro 2.1 with a different launch graphic. It was identical. So pretty good. Used that for a long time. they started making some changes, asking their test team, which I was still a part of, what did they think. And we came up with, let me open this up for you. This is what Audition 1.5 looked like. Again, you can do some stuff that's not totally destructive here, but still you're doing most of your changes with this list of icons at the top, and you're constantly still going back and forth between CD view and multi-track view. The big thing they added here was a CD project view. And it was great. People use it for years. In fact, I still know people that use Audition 1.5 because it's absolutely rock solid. The one thing they put in here, which was fantastic, is they put in crash recovery. So if you're doing anything with audio and it becomes too much for the computer and it just kind of disappears, when you relaunch the software, it gives you the option to go back to exactly where you were. So for radio use, this was brilliant. Rock solid, really decent software. Everybody was really getting into it and wondering what we would come up with next. So from 1.5, which was the first real Adobe version, they came up with Audition 2.0, which was crap. I mean, it was god awful. It was buggy, it would crash frequently, and the crash recovery system wouldn't take you back to where you were. It took you back to where you were at 9 o'clock in the morning, which really doesn't help when it's 6 o'clock and you're trying to get one last thing finished before you go home for the day. So 2.0, awful. We got rid of it as fast as we could, and about 6 months after Audition 2.0 came Audition 3.0. So let me go to that one. So this is what Audition 3.0 looked like. And if you look at it quite closely, it's actually really close to what is happening now with the software. Again, you still have edit and waveform views, but now you have the main multi-track view plus the mixer view. So this is becoming more and more influenced by Pro Tools, which is the main competitor to Audition. And this was the first time that added time stretch. Now, the only problem is it wasn't real time stretch, like it didn't happen instantly. Every time you applied a time stretch, it would take about 2 minutes to render. So a little slow, but rock solid. This was industry standard for close to a decade. More and more radio stations got into Audition with 3.0 because the software was that good. It really did everything radio needed to do. And I am a total expert at 3.0. And at that point, Adobe decided that they wanted to upgrade things and get a new test team. So they did, and they've come out with various versions since. They came out, there was no 4.0, there was actually an Audition 5.0, which was not terribly great. Again, it was sort of every other release was great. And then they came out with Audition 6.0. This is Audition CS6. This was the last version of Audition you could buy. I actually have all the various versions I've shown you are installed on my laptop, and all of them still work. And I still use a couple of them. I still use 1.5 because for some unknown reason, any input it will record. It doesn't require a fancy setup, whereas the more recent versions of Audition won't record on my laptop for some reason, but I can import the files. So my workaround at home is to record on Audition 1.5, save the file, and then open up either this version, Audition 6, or the new version, Audition CC 2020, and work on stuff at home. And all of them work fine. I can open up Audition 3.0 and it works great. 1.5 still works fantastic. So like I said, if they had continued with the naming tradition that they had been using, this version here, which is the most current version, this would be Audition 12. But since they went to the Creative Cloud, this is Audition CC 2020. Works great. I haven't actually been able to crash this yet. And I really like how immediate things are. And this is the version you guys have been using in one form or another last year. And this year, hopefully with the direct download from the college so you can work at home. I am recording this actually in May in preparation for the fall semester. So there's a couple of things that are new in here that I want to show you that I think are totally fantastic. And the first thing is a feature called templates. So if I go to create a new multi-track session, I get this pop-up window. This is where we set the sample rate. This is where we set the bit depth, whether we want the session to be mono or stereo. And some people aren't paying attention to this. You set the sample rate once and you think you're fine, and then you start transferring files into a new session, not realizing that you're transferring mono files, and the session goes, okay, everything's in mono. That's why when you mix down something, it becomes mono. But there's this little line here in the middle called template. So if I set up a new session just like this, it's going to have everything completely blank, right? It's going to have default stereo input, whatever, everything I do when it goes to the mixer, everything's going to master, nothing's preset. But with a template, let's close this session. With a template, I can go create a new session and go to my templates. And some of these are mine, a couple of them are mine, and a couple of them are what Adobe thinks you need. A template is just something that presets your work environment. So here, for example, if I scroll down, I have voiceover music with a bus. So if I open that up, now when it opens up, I've got the multi-track environment already set to have voice 1, voice 2, voice 3, voice bus. I will get to busing in a moment, music bed, and then master. If I look at my mixer, I've got voice 1, voice 2, voice 3, and then the voice bus. I've already got my compressor preset, I've got my EQ preset, and I've got a complementary EQ going on the music bed. So things are preset. I can just put things directly into this, and I'm already way ahead on my mix. So templates, this is a feature that's been kind of stolen from Pro Tools, because Pro Tools uses templates as well. And it's just a shortcut. And you can put in whatever template you want. You can write your own templates. So let me, again, look at some of my other templates. Multi-track session. I'm going to create a Lancers template. So if basketball was happening and we were covering Lancers home or away basketball games, we would be doing promos for those games to get people to listen on 91X. So if I go to Lancers template and open it up, I've already got the Lancers bed in there. I've got some basketball crowd sounds. I've got some actual basketball sounds. My main VO, date updates, plus again a voice bus. And if I look at my mixer, it pre-saves everything. So I've got my main VO, I've got my date updates muted, I've got my compressor already built in. I've got the EQ already built in on my voices. And look, on the master output, I've got a hard limiter. So just to make sure that this promo is going to be as loud as it possibly can be, and then it trims off the clips. So how do I create a template? You think these are a good idea to use? I couldn't agree more. I'm really glad I found out about this feature. I am just terribly saddened I didn't have it in my career, because I would have totally stripped out the templates. I would have had just the ones I would have wanted to use. Every time I created a session, it would be template, boom, go, ready to make things happen. So how do we create a template? First, no, I don't want to close all. Oh, it just did. Oh, well. First, you create a new multi-track session. And in this case, we want none. We are going to create something from blank. So the first thing I'm going to do is imagine what kind of tracks I'm going to have, and I'm going to rename them. If you just click on the track name, track 1, track 2, track 3, you can rename it. So we're going to have voice 1, and we'll make that a 2-voice commercial, voice 2, and I'm going to have a music bed and some sound effects. So I've got the tracks named. What do I want to do with those tracks? Well, for that I need to go to the mixer. So voice 1, what are some of the things I'm going to have on any voice I work with? Well, I'm going to have an EQ, and I'm going to look at the multi-track track EQ, and I'm going to set up my main EQ setting for my voice. Now I know typically most of the voices I record are going to have something resembling this kind of EQ curve. And when I start putting actual voices in, if that EQ doesn't work, I know it's going to be close, so I can just go in and tweak it. Again, this is presetting general stuff, so I can go in and fine tune it quickly. So I'm going to have EQ built in. I'm also going to make sure that I add a compressor to that. I like the tube modeled compressor. 3:1, I think I'm going to record at a much higher level than that. So that's where I'm going to put my threshold. 3:1 is a good starting point, and those are the attack release settings I like. So now when I drop a voice track into this track, it's already going to have track EQ on it, and it's already going to have effects on it. So if I go look, there's my compressor, and here is my EQ curve. So I already know that anything I put in this track of this mixer is going to have the stuff I already want on it. So voice 2, what am I going to do on voice 2? Voice 2 is typically going to need a compressor as well. So I will put the same compressor on there. But maybe this is just a voice, an accent voice. So it might need some reverb on it. And I'm going to put studio reverb on it. I'm going to start with just a room ambient preset. That'll be fine. So now the accent voice, or the voice that comes in after the main voice emphasizing a point, is going to have a little bit of reverb on it. And I'm going to put some track EQ on that as well. I roll off the low frequencies. In fact, this is going to be a female voice, so I'm going to roll off the low frequency even more. And then the high frequency, I'm going to have about the same. But in this case, I think I will add a bit of angry mid-range sounds. And make that a little bit wider. That might be too much. 5 dB is too much. So now we've got a little mid-range bump, so that voice is really going to cut through. So now voice 2 is going to have compressor and reverb on it, and it's going to have a slightly different EQ. So there's my voices set up. I'm going to set up the music bed. Do I need a compressor on that? No, I don't. It's probably already done, but I can probably use some low frequency, some EQ on this. So I will use low frequency to boost the bottom end where there's going to be no voice, and take away from the high end where I want my voice to be a little bit more easy to understand. So I'm going to save that, and there's my EQ on the music bed. I also know that when I mix something, I usually have to turn the master volume down by about 2, and maybe I want to put a hard limiter on that as well, just so everything sounds the way it's going to sound, loud and punchy. Maximum amplitude minus 0.1, boost everything by 1, sure. So that's the template I want to create. So for here, I have, oops, that's what I want. I'll have 2 voices and a music bed with some sound effects. And then I've got a hard limiter on the output. So I'm going to save that as a template. Maybe I do a lot of commercials that have 2 voice. So how do I save a template? I get my blank EQ, blank mixer, my blank multi-track session set up the exact way I want. I go to File, Export, Session as a template. So I'm going to save it to the local computer. I would imagine you can also save that to your portable hard drive and use that as a template anytime you want. But I'm going to call this a 2 voice commercial with sound effects. And I'm going to save that template. So I can close that now. And no, I don't want to save those changes, because now when I open a multi-track session and go to templates, I have 2 voice commercial with sound effects. I can open that up and it's already set to go. I just have to drop my voice, drop my music and sound effects in, and I'm already at the mix stage. So this is a great time saver if you find you end up setting up the same sort of session for multiple clients, multiple projects. If you're constantly setting stuff up with multiple voices, with a compressor and EQ, and then music with EQ, and then when you go to the output channel, you're constantly dipping the master volume a little. You can preset all of this stuff and not have to worry about it. All of a sudden, you're just loading tracks in and then getting set for the mix down. But what about all those other templates in there that I don't want to see? So if I create a multi-track session and I'm looking at the templates, there's a bunch of stuff in here I'm never ever going to use. Ever. So why do I need to keep a template in there because the fine people at Adobe thought it was a great idea? Here's what you do. It's hidden in the user information on the local computer. So I need to go to my C drive, users, public. No, in fact, it was users Craig. Craig. Where did it go? Hang on. It's here somewhere. Sorry, I have this. I just can't remember where it is off the top of my head. So let me double check my notes. Public documents. Okay. I knew I was right the first time. Okay, so local hard drive, users, public documents, Adobe, Audition. Now I've got it here twice. It actually will probably show up in both. So if I go to the new version, here's session templates. Session templates. I can get rid of these if I don't want to use them, right? Just delete them because it's just data. If I look in the other file, there's my 2 voice commercial with sound effects. There's my Lancers template. There's my voiceover music with bus, which is another one that I've created and we'll show you in a minute. So if I go to local data drive, C, users, public documents, Adobe, Audition, and then you might, don't forget, I have 4 different versions of the program here. So yes, I have version 5 and version 13. Okay, so which one is it? I just happened to check both. So version 5 on my computer has 2 voice commercial with sound effects. So I can get rid of 24 track music session because I'm never going to use that. I can get rid of the templates I'm not going to use and only use the templates I'm going to use. So how does that work on your computer? You can set up your computer any way you want. How does it work in the studio when we get access back in the studio? Well, you can either make the same template in every studio you're going to use, which as a second year should be 2 different studios, maybe 3, or save your templates, remember it showed you how to export a session as a template, and you could search where you wanted to save it. So again, let me create a multi-track session with no template. And then if I go to export session as a template, location is where it's going to get saved. Well, who says you can't change that using here? It jumps to edit preferences, Audition session templates. Where's your location going to be? Well, it might be anywhere I want to put it. I can put it in my D drive, which is a USB drive, hard drive, or I can put it in my E drive, which is just my thumb drive. I've got both of them plugged into this computer. So I can tell the software where to go find my templates, and I can save them wherever I want. That means I get rid of all the Adobe ones I don't want. So templates, great idea. Time saver, use them. You will like them. One thing I mentioned in going through that was I mentioned busing. What is busing? Busing is fantastic. The more you use busing, the more you are going to like it. So here is a fairly simple session. Let me just kind of zoom in on stuff we need to see and mute out what we don't need to see for now. And this is a fairly simple commercial for Red Ball Radio. So you've got two voice tracks that are stacked up at beginning and end, and a middle part. What this is called an update. This would have mentioned some kind of dates at the beginning and the end, and this second track would mention different dates at the beginning and the end, but the middle is all the same. So why do more work than I need to? If I'm doing a commercial with updates, say it's three different date mentions, why do I need to read the commercial 3 times? I don't. I read 3 different intros, a common middle, and then 3 different extras, and then link them all together. When I want the first date, I mute the second date and activate the first date. So we're going to play this track, then the middle part all together, and then the end track. So let me go to the beginning of this and show you what I mean.
Fade to Black has been held over to Saturday at Red Ball Radio. Crazy low prices on the latest LG and Samsung TVs. How about an LG 65-inch 4K Smart TV for $799? Award-winning best-in-class 55-inch LEG OLED for $1599. Fade to Black deals on car and home stereo too. Shop and save big until Saturday only at Red Ball Radio. Centrally hidden at 6 North Front Street, Belleville, or on the interweb at redballradio.com.
So that's the first version. Date
Fade to Black has been held over to Saturday
and this other version has a different date mention.
Fade to Black has been held over to today at Red Ball Radio.
So today update, and then the middle part is the same on both. Why do more work than I have to? Set it up once. Could have as many date updates as I need. Believe me, I have had things that have had 17 or 20 different date updates, and I'm not reading the same commercial 17 or 20 times. I'm going to read it once and then read the date updates and then plug them in as I need them. Great time saver, huh? There's something else you can do to save yourself a ton of time. If I'm going to have a pile of tracks with different dates on them, does that mean I have to add individual compression and EQ with the same settings 17 or 20 times? No. What we want to do is something called busing. So let me go over to the mixer here. And you can tell I've set something up as a bus because look at the output of every track. So the music bed was first, it's going to master. Voice update 1 is going to voice bus. Voice update 2 is going to voice bus. The common middle is going to voice bus. And then we have the voice bus track. So these don't have anything happening. There's no compression, there's no EQ. These are just tracks that happen to have audio on them. And instead of sending them over here to the main output, I've sent them to this new track I've created. And here I put the compressor, here I put the EQ. So as opposed to doing it 3 times for compressor and 3 times for EQ, going back and forth to make sure I've got the same settings on all of them, I just do it once. So I put in a compressor and I set my compressor settings because the voice levels are all going to be the same. I set my EQ, so the EQ is going to be the same on all 3 voice parts. And then that voice bus, that goes to master to mix with the music bed. So a bus is an alternative output, right? I can have this set to master, which means I would have to do all my processing every time I use it, or I can send it to a bus. And that's what I've done. So when I set this session up, I had music bed, voice 1, voice 2, voice 3. As opposed to master, I come up here in the mixer and I say, I want to send this to a bus. Am I going to add a new bus? Well, sure, I might, but it's already here. So I'm going to send this to voice bus. And then if we look at the multi-track session, voice bus shows up as its own track. So now all these 3 voices come down to this track, and this track gets mixed with the music bed. Busing is using an alternative output, sending all tracks that are going to be the same to one control point. And that's what we use to control multi-different tracks with one single fader. If I had multiple music beds, I could send all the music beds to their own bus as well. So how do I do this? Well, here I've got an extra music bed on track 1. I'm going to do something with that in a minute for you. So if I take track 1 and I'm going to add it to a bus, I'm going to add a bus. See here, I've got all these tracks sent to bus. They're already going to the voice bus. If I wanted to send it to a different bus, I could do that. What you need to know is when you add a bus, you can't get rid of that. You can just not send audio to it. But if I went and added a bus, I'm going to add a bus. I'm going to have a stereo bus this time. So I've got voice bus. This is labeling as bus A. I could have this as music bus. So automatically this changes to music bus. And now the output of this track goes here. And I can do anything with it. And I can change the output of this to music bus. So now these 2 music tracks are being controlled by this extra bus. In fact, if I turn the effects and the EQ off on the music, I can then add them back in over here. So busing is fantastic. Busing saved me so much time through my career, getting all these voices, which were recorded at the same time and are all going to have the same level and need the same compression and need the same EQ. I can now control that with one fader and only put all that stuff in once. If you're working on a computer that's maybe not as powerful as it should be, adding a bus means you're only using 1/3 of the computing power that would normally be used if I had 3 different compressors and 3 different EQs. And it puts everything together. So now when I go to mix stuff down, I just turn on what I want to hear and turn off what I don't need to hear, highlight my session, right? Those are the files I'm all going to mix down, and I'm going to export that, a multi-track mix down, time selection, what am I going to call it, where am I going to save it, done. Do the next one, turn that off, turn that back on, go to export a multi-track mix down, time selection, going to save it with a different name, wherever I'm going to save it, what kind of file it's going to be, boom, done. I just did 2 commercials in probably 30 seconds worth of mix down time. Much better use of your time and much better workflow. As I mentioned, you cannot, unfortunately, get rid of this. Once the bus is there, you can't get rid of it, but you can just revert where you send stuff. Okay, so I'm always going to keep those voices going to the voice bus, but the music I am going to send to the master volume control. Love busing. Use it all the time. Okay, so busing saves you time. Templates save you time. So when you're having a busy day, when you have multiple projects on the go, you're always looking for things that are going to save you time. Now, the next thing I want to show you is called sidechain compression. Now, if you remember dynamics processing, and if you remember going through the advanced compression tools and how much I like the tube modeled compressor and why I like the tube modeled compressor, all we're doing with compression is changing the output level of a track based on its input level. So if I go back and look at my tube modeled compressor, this is the input level. This is where I'm setting the threshold. And what happens when I cross the threshold? It means I start using compression, in this case at 4:1, and I'm making up the 9 dB of audio that I threw away. Okay, so compression changes the output level of a track based on its input level. There's another thing you can do with compression, and it's called sidechaining. And what sidechaining does is changes the output level of a track based on another track. So as opposed to the compressor looking at the input level, the compressor looks somewhere else on your mixer to find what you want it to do. And sidechain becomes like its own automatic mixer. I know a lot of people that everything they do is sidechained. If you listen to a lot of CHR radio and how the music's really loud, and as soon as somebody talks, the music drops down instantly so they can be heard, and as soon as they stop talking, the music jumps up instantly. That's because the music is sidechaining and it's listening to the microphone to know when to drop the music level. I don't do this. I find it doesn't work for me. It takes longer for me to set it up. But lots of people do this in the industry. Lots of people do it every single time. It's kind of, it started out in the 50s and it's really evolved over time. And I know lots of producers that sidechain left, right, and center, and they think it's great. Doesn't work for me. That's not to say it's not going to work for you. I would prefer to set up my own mix. I find it just as fast. The other thing that's really interesting about sidechaining in Audition is the tool you have to use to do it with. Remember last year when I showed you this. I showed you the dynamics processing module and how you had to use the curve to get gain reduction. And the good thing about the current version of this module in Audition CC 2020 is it has an actual gain reduction meter built in for the very first time, which is fantastic. Trust me, in every version of Audition I've used before this, there is no gain reduction meter and you're doing it by ear, which is why I get students to do it, so they get listening to the idea of compression so they can see the levels go down and yet still sound natural. So to sidechain, this is the only processor built into Audition that is set up to do sidechaining. Let me show you what I've done. If I go back to my mixer and to the music bed track, you will notice in the effects, there's the dynamic processor. Right? If I open it up, there it is. You can see it's got a curve on it and it's lowering the audio at 4.13 to 1. The only difference is this box here, and it's setting up sidechain input. And if I click on that, it's going to be a stereo input. And if I go to the box beside it, which is how it's routing audio through this, the left channel input affects the left channel output, but here's the sidechain in. And look, voice bus slot 1. So if I go to my voice bus, you will see something else is turned on here. And this is in the sends area. And if I open that up a little bit, I have alternate outputs. So I've got voice on the 3 voice tracks. I have set their output to go to the voice bus. On the voice bus, I'm taking a different alternate output of this, and I'm sending it as a sidechain to the dynamics processor on music bed slot 1. So the output here of the voice bus is going to the master output, master track. That's great. But at the same time, I'm opening up sends, and send is another alternate output. And I'm taking an alternate output of the voice bus and sending it to the dynamics processor here. Let me open this here. So now every time there's voice coming out of here, the dynamics processor says, oh, I see my input, I have to turn the volume down and compress it. As soon as there is nothing coming out of here, the dynamics processor sees, oh, nothing in my input, I'll turn off. It's a smart on-off switch. So what I've got set up is when there's something talking, this reduces the volume of the music. And how can I show you this? Let me mute my beginning and end. So all I'm going to have is the middle voice part. Watch the bottom levels down here. So the music bed's going to be loud. It's going to drop down when this voice part comes in. And then when it ends, it's automatically going to go all the way back up. Watch this.
Crazy low prices on the latest LG and Samsung TVs. How about an LG 65-inch 4K Smart TV for $799? Award-winning best-in-class 55-inch LED OLED for $1599. Fades of black deals on car and home stereo too.
So automatically the voice stops, the music goes back up. Let me show you kind of a different context of this. Let me bring my voice part back in. Let me mute the 2 prices. I'm going to click on the 2 prices and I'm just going to mute them. And I'm going to shorten up this extra. So now
Fade to Black has been held over to today at Red Ball Radio. Crazy low prices on the latest LG and Samsung TVs. How about an LG 65-inch 4K Smart TV? Award-winning best-in-class 55-inch LED OLED. Fades of black deals on car and home stereo too. Shop and save big today at Red Ball Radio. Centrally hidden at 6 North Front Street, Belleville.
So I must have tweaked something in the mixer a little bit, so because my levels were off. They used to be just perfect. So let me go back and take a look at this again. And watch the levels just as we hit the prices, music bed shoots up. And we get to the end where I've shortened up the extra, music bed automatically just shoots up. So let me just turn that back just a hair.
G65-inch 4K Smart TV. Award-winning best-in-class 55-inch LED OLED. Fades of black deals on car and home stereo too. Shop and save big today at Red Ball Radio. Centrally hidden at 6 North Front Street, Belleville.
So it's like an automatic mixer, right? So this is called sidechaining. And again, to explain what's going on here and looking at it with the actual processor going on, now I'll play it through and look at the gain reduction on the dynamics processor module that's on the music bed. So we'll start from the beginning.
Fade to Black has been held over to today at Red Ball Radio. Crazy low prices on the latest LG and Samsung TVs. How about an LG 65-inch 4K smart TV? Award-winning best-in-class 55-inch LED OLED. Fade to Black deals on car and home stereo too. Shop and save big today at Red Ball Radio. Centrally hidden at 6 North Front Street, Belleville.
So when there's nothing going through the dynamics processor, you saw the gain reduction jump all the way back to 0. And then when these voice parts were coming through, the gain reduction jumped down to about 7, maybe 8 dB. So it's mixing things automatically. Neat idea. I don't have anything against this. I just find it a bit of a pain to set up. So I don't typically use it. The other thing is, and if you listen really carefully, you'll really hear the difference. So if I go to this end extra part, you can see, if you look really closely here, there's a couple of little gaps. And the processor is so fast, it's seeing no audio in this little gap and shuts itself off. So the music bed jumps back up for a tiny fraction of a second. How many fractions of a second am I talking about? Let me close this. Well, look at this gap here. How long is it? It is 1/10 of a second. So in 1/10 of a second, it's going to jump all the way up, see audio come in, and have to jump all the way down. So that when that happens, it's called pumping. The music pumps up and pumps down so fast, and it's a little bit distracting. So again, let me just play that so you get the idea of what I'm talking about.
Fade to Black deals on car and home stereo too. Shop and save big today at Red Ball Radio. Centrally hidden at 6 North Front Street, Belleville.
So these two gaps, a gap here and a gap here, are big enough that your sidechain is going to pump up and pump down, and I don't like that. But I like the idea of sidechaining. Sure, it kind of makes the mix easy, and it makes sure that your music is going to be as blaringly loud as it possibly could be. So sidechaining, worth the time? Not to me. Worth the time to you? Sure. Made a really nice mix, right? My levels were super consistent all the way through because that music bed came up where there was nothing happening. Would sound really good on the air. Would anybody else notice those little pumping gaps? Probably not. Would I notice them? Probably. So when you're setting up this mix, decide if you want to sidechain it. And again, if you're going to sidechain, the only processor that will do it is the dynamics processor. And again, to do it, you have to enable that you have a sidechain that it's listening for, and then you have to use a send to actually send the control audio to the dynamics processor. Cool. I think it's kind of a neat thing, and I can see the instance where you might want to do that. So, just recording only what you need to do and having updates on separate tracks, great idea, saves a ton of time. I've done it for decades, do it. Busing, yes, saves a lot of time, do it. Templates, yes, I can see how that's going to save you a lot of time. I am incredibly jealous. I never had the opportunity to use that in my career. So 3 out of 3 good. Sidechaining, meh, not for me. Okay, it might be for you, and it's certainly something that you should spend a couple of minutes and really try and explore. Next thing I want to show you. I have used this in my career. has to be for something really, really complicated for me to go back and use this. So if you've noticed, when you set stuff up in Audition, the tracks will come up different sizes. So here on the music bed, I've got nothing set as an input, the master is the output, and then there's this read box. What does read mean? So let me expand that track a little bit. And with this side arrow here, you get a different drop-down menu. What this is automation. And by automation, I mean you can fully automate literally everything in Audition. And it shows up as a volume envelope. So you've already used the volume envelope up here. You put a breakpoint in. It's called a breakpoint or a data point, and you put them in, and boom, that's how you lower the volume on stuff. That's how I like to work. It makes sense to me. But you can now do that with literally everything. So here on this music bed, if I go back to the mixer for a sec, what is happening on this music bed? I've got a dynamics processor. And what kind of controls do I have on the dynamics processor? Well, I'm going to have makeup gain. I'm going to have a threshold point. I'm going to have a compression ratio. There's other stuff here on the settings page that all have different settings. Plus, I've got EQ, and the track EQ, right? How many different things am I going to see here? I've got low frequencies. I might have high pass filter. I've got EQ 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that have a gain and a width control, and then all kinds of different controls on that. If I go back to my automation and show the envelopes, I have pan and mute, sure, but look at the different envelopes I can totally automate just on track EQ. I can have an automation line for every single one of these, plus rack input, which is not one I would realistically use. I'm going to turn that off. Dynamics processing. I've got my input gain and my output gain. I've got spline curves that I could set. I've got gain processor. I've got attack and release settings. Because everything else is done visually there, I don't have necessarily the full settings there. But if I went to my voice bus that I know has all kinds of different things happening on it, I can show envelopes, tube modeled compressor. There, I can automate everything on the tube modeled compressor. I can automate everything on my track EQ. I can modify pan and whether I'm going to send it, whether I'm going to turn that track on or off. So you are limited here by your imagination. I find for radio use, automation is overkill. That said, I have used it on productions that were overkill. Productions that had thousands of things, not thousands, that's maybe an exaggeration, that had dozens of things happening at the same time in terms of music bed, sound effects, and voice parts, plus effects going on, and I could have those effects automate over time. How would I do that? Well, maybe on track EQ, I could take that middle track EQ, the middle EQ, and have it morph over time. I could have it modify. So at the beginning of the sentence, it started out normal, and have it modify over the length of a sentence. So by the end of a sentence, it was a real nasal voice sound that becomes more and more piercing into the listener, and they really understand what that track is saying. How would I do that? I would set up a track EQ on band 3 gain. So I want to have band 3 gain. So now at the beginning of a sentence, I would have it start at 0. And by the end of the sentence, I might have it increase by a certain number of dB. Let's say 10 dB. That's a lot. And then at the beginning of the next sentence, it goes all the way down to 0. And then that sentence, I'll rise it up over the length of the sentence and then drop it down. So I can automate anything in Audition. I can have it happen over time. I can have track EQ. I can turn it on and off. So track EQ bypass is the one I'm going to edit now. And maybe I only wanted to have track EQ to there. So I'm going to have it off and then turn it on. And then by the time I'm finished with it, I'm going to turn it off again. So I can bring things in and out based on where we are in the production on the timeline. And I can automate everything. So it's cool that way. Now, I would suggest if you start getting multiple bands like this, you have to really be sure of which automation line you are editing, and you might want to click on this, which then locks that particular band. So here I've got EQ bypass, and I have it locked. That means I can't edit it. And I might go in and lock all of them. So just so I don't edit something by mistake. And again, you can also use the view on this here. So if you want to show volume envelopes, pan envelopes, effect control, gain envelopes, you have to have these enabled. And that when you're doing this, pan and volume always show up right on your clip. So you have to be sure what you are editing, which is why for the most times I take pan envelopes off unless I'm specifically panning something left, right over time. So read shows you the automation envelopes. And then if you're going to edit it, you have to edit, enable, and then click drag points. But there's other modes you can do. So I can turn off automation. See all these lines blank out. I can still edit them, but they won't be in effect on the audio. So if I have automation off, I can still set stuff up going, well, I want to point here and I want to point there. Or I can do it automatically. And this is where things get really, really weird. And you have to be sure of what you are doing. So if I go back to the beginning of a track and I have right enabled here on track EQ, so this middle part, if I hit play, it will automatically record any of the EQ changes I decide to make.
Fade to Black has been held over to today at Red Ball Radio. Crazy low prices on the latest LG and Samsung TVs. How about an LG 65-inch 4K Smart TV? Award-winning best-in-class 55-inch LED OLED. Fade to Black deals on car and home stereo too. Shop and save big today at Red Ball Radio. Centrally hidden at 6 North Front Street, Belleville.
And I could have touch control, so every time I play this
Fade to Black has been held over to
touch
today at Red Ball Radio. Crazy low prices on the latest LG and Samsung TVs.
You actually need the integrated mixer for this, but touch and latch are fairly simple. So every time I would latch onto that, my automation would automatically start writing, and it would latch writes all the way through. Touch writes new automation lines only when my writing device is touched to it. So it can get really complicated really fast, which is why for most radio use, I don't think you need automation. And you could, have that read or off, and it would be perfectly fine. When you're doing something really complex that you want things to change over time, this is when you would use automation. If you wanted an EQ to change over time, or an echo or delay to happen loud at one part but quiet in another, you would have to automate the effect envelopes on that and make it happen over time. Do I think it's great for radio use? For radio use, no, it's total overkill. This is more for music production where you have a lot of things going on and a lot of very small changes happening over the course of 3, 4, 5 minutes based on 24 or 48 tracks. For radio use where you're generally playing with 5 or 6 things at a time, really not something you're going to need every single time you do something. but it's there should you feel the need. This is super advanced production technique. In the course of my career, how many times did I use automation? I can count them on my fingers. So doesn't matter how complex it becomes, I find it easier really to just use the volume envelope, set up my mix that way. And if I'm putting different effects on different tracks, different clips, I will put them on different tracks. I find that much easier for my brain rather than trying to keep a smaller number of tracks dealing with automation. Again, this doesn't necessarily work for me. Maybe it will work for you the way you want to produce things. Last thing I want to show you, and this is a new feature that I have not spent a lot of time with, but I will tell you right now, I don't like it. I think it's lazy. But you can be your own master of decisions there. So on this session that I have the 30-second version of the music bed. So what if you're going through Universal Production Music and you find a music bed you really like, but it's 3 minutes long? How do you fit a 3-minute music bed into a radio commercial production? Well, you could just fade it out. I find that lazy. It would certainly work. I could take the first 30 seconds and start fading it out at 29, and nobody would know any difference except me, and I would be very disappointed in you. The other thing you can do, and the better answer to this, would be to actually edit the music bed. So take my 3-minute version and find which parts of the music bed I want to keep. Well, I want to keep the intro, and I want to keep the extro, and I like that bit in the middle, so I would have these 3 bits, and I would have to line them up and either edit them together or crossfade and mix them together, and that would be fine. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the best answer to how I get a 3-minute music bed in a 30 or 60 second radio commercial. But there's a new feature built into Audition. It's called Remix. And it will automatically edit for you. So here, that's not what I'm looking for. That's the other version. So here I've got the 30 and the 60. So there's the 60-second version of the music bed, and here's the original 3-minute version of the music bed. Great. They both don't fit into 30 seconds. So let me use one. I'm going to take it to its own track here, and I will just mute that one for now. So here's a 3-minute music bed. How do I fit it into 30 seconds? Well, I might take this chunk here and edit it and then quickly fade out the end. Or I might take this intro and then see if I can edit to the actual end of the music bed. Or I just might take this section and have it be its own little section and not have to worry about any editing. What I can do is click on the clip, and I can right-click to enable Remix. Or I can go to the clip menu and do the same thing. I'm going to enable Remix on that track. And as you can see, it's going to analyze that music clip, and it will take a minute to go through it and see which is which and what key things are in and the rhythm of things. And it's going to analyze it. Still doing that. So it's a 3-minute clip. Takes a bit to go through. Trust me, the other ones will go through much quicker. Let me zoom in on this so we can really see what's going on. So if you look carefully, you can see here, it's got that little squiggle in the top corner, just like the time compression if we were going to do that, or the fade envelopes here. You can see a little icon in each corner. And you notice when I drag my mouse over that end line and then over the remix icon, I get a second icon with that little cross on it, and then Remix pops up. So now what I can do, and this is interesting, but there's a downside. So I've got a 3 minute, a little bit more than 3 minutes, right? I've got it starting at 3 minutes and it goes to 6 minutes. So now what I can do is I can click on this end track and I can squish this down to 30 seconds, right about there. And automatically it has edited something together for me. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. And we'll see that the timing on that, 27, so I'd have to fade in the beginning a little bit. But you can see where it's automatically made some edits. What does it sound like? So we fade in this part, music starts. Those two edits are fairly clean. And then this is just the end of the music bed. So by doing that, did we come up with something workable? In this case, we did. Right? The real part of the music there is 25, but we can take something off the beginning and have it fade in a little bit. That's not so bad. I have had other instances where I've tried to do this, and I've tried to take a 2-minute version and condense it down to 30, and it refused to go. It just didn't work. But if I wanted a 45 or a 22, it would be fine. It just wouldn't give me a 30-second version. So Remix does the work you are supposed to do and does it automatically. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? And you have to be satisfied with the results. Now, what if I wanted to stretch that out a little bit and see what happens? All of a sudden, the edit looks a little bit different. I tried to stretch that out by 4 or 5 seconds, and it stretched it out to 50, right? Remember, I had it down to 30, and we had to add 5 seconds in on the beginning. So I just tried to drag it out a little bit, and now this is the first thing it gave me. We're back to 50 seconds, and I still have to find a way to make that fit into 30. So it gives me a nice 40. So this can be a little frustrating if you're dealing with something trying to make it fit into a certain time, because quite frankly, it might not fit into a certain time. But it's a different idea of editing. It's only in Audition, and it's not in all versions of Audition. So if you go somewhere else and you're expecting, I'll just remix the track, and you go to the right-click menu or the clip drop-down menu, Remix doesn't exist. So what do you do then? Well, then you have to edit it manually. So I much prefer to edit things manually. That way I know what I'm getting rather than going click, drag. I don't like that. Tweak it a little bit. I like that even less. And I'm wasting time trying to get my 30-second music bed. So if I've got a piece of music and it has to go into a 30-second commercial, the first thing I'm going to do, download the 30. The second thing I'm going to do is take whatever music bed I like and edit it to 30. I'm going to do that because I know how to do that and I know what I want for my production. But this is kind of neat, right? Do I think it should be removed from the program? No, I think it's kind of interesting. And on one of those situations where the length really doesn't matter, yeah, that might work out really well. And could you do the same thing and actually extend a piece of music? So here's the 60 up here. I'll unmute that. Unmute that, and I will enable Remix. Now, what if I really like the 60 and I want to change the 60 into a 2-minute version? By the way, that's my cat in the background. He thinks he wants to be fed. He's wrong. So now I can take Remix and drag something out, and it will automatically edit the length of it for me. And again, you can see the length isn't what I specified. It's put in an extra 5 seconds. But That's a much better way of taking something that's too short and lengthening it rather than taking something that's too long and trying to shrink it down. So what tools did I show you today? If you have multiple edits, don't reread the commercial multiple times. Do it once and then change the edit parts, putting them on different tracks. Turning stuff on and off as you go saves you a ton of time. Busing, if you have multiple voice parts that are all going to have the same processing on it, why do it multiple times? Send everything to a bus, set it up once, turn stuff on and off as you go, saving you a ton of time. Templates, love the idea of templates. All I'm doing then is just inserting into a mix that's already half there. I make a couple of tweaks, I'm done. Templates, great idea. Use them. Sidechain, not for me. But if you like the results you get because you get a much higher, more consistent level, I'm totally behind that. So sidechain uses the dynamics processor, and you take a send output to send to that dynamics processor that tells it when to turn on and off. Neat idea. I can see the need for it, but again, not for me. Automation. Yes, if it's really, really complicated, you're making it more complicated still, but you're going to get a much more consistent result. You can automate, I am not kidding, literally everything in Audition. You can have as many automation lines as you want to look at. Great. Knock yourself out. Again, I've used it maybe 10 times in my career. The times when I used it, there were a couple I just used it to sort of see what it was like. There were one or two where the only way to do what I wanted to do was through automation. So automation might be something you need going forward. And lastly, remix, not for me. It's neat. It might give you a different, unexpected result. I certainly wouldn't dissuade you from using it. I think there's better ways of editing music rather than have it happen automatically. It may save you time, however, and there may be instances where that trumps everything. All right? There will be a separate instruction for this week's assignment. Again, if you have any questions on this stuff, please don't hesitate to either email me or ask me to do a face-to-face. Now, because of restrictions, we can't actually do face-to-face, but we could do a Zoom meeting and I could walk through it using your audio files to show you how you can use all these tools in your own context. Take the time, practice these. They really, really will work for you. Okay? Thanks, everybody.